July is one of the more interesting months of the baseball season, being carved in half by the All-Star break. 4 months of near continuous play being broken up by a 4 day break ends up shaking momentum of the season in huge ways. If that wasn't enough, the trade deadline also falls on the 31st, and the stove is always hot in the weeks leading up to it. The race for the top of the AL East has gotten more interesting over July, with the Yankees going through a bit of a slump. Taking the most advantage is the Blue Jays, who won their first 8 games of the month, including sweeping the Yankees to take over the division lead. They haven't looked back ever since, and the All Star break didn't stop this momentum at all. Their lead over the division only continues to grow as they finally look like the guys we thought they would be. The Yankees are mired in a cesspool of injuries, and it's finally caught up to them after a lethargic start to the summer. Their offense is still firing on all cylinders to keep them atop the wildcard race, but they're literally running out of pitching arms. They might be able to ride into a wildcard spot just off their offense, but you can't make a World Series run with only two good starters. The Red Sox rode a weak schedule at the beginning of the month to re-establish themselves and get their bats right. They won 10 games in a row before the All-Star break to burst into the AL wildcard race. Cedane Rafaela is having an excellent year, and this month has been his best so far. With Aroldis Chapman returning to All-Star form and their rotation finally looking stout, the Red Sox are finally looking like they're reaching their potential. Maybe the Devers trade wasn't so bad after all. The Rays started the month by dropping a lot of winnable games, most of which by one run. They're slipping back down to a 500 record, which does feel appropriate for this squad. They're still in striking distance for a wild card spot, but they've got to stop dropping games to teams like the White Sox and Athletics if they want to get in. The Orioles continue to show flashes of potential, but are ultimately just waiting for the next season at this point. There's honestly not that much to do when all of their pitchers have an ERA above 4. At the very least, they won't end up with one of the worst records in the league, but that's not much of a consolation. As the season goes on, the AL Central is the most clear-cut division of them all, with only one team sporting a winning record. The Tigers are still one of the best teams in the league, but they hit some snags around the All-Star break, losing 6 in a row. Things haven't gotten much better since the break either, as they just keep getting blown out. We can only hope that this is just some growing pains with having such a big division lead, but they've got to start getting back into championship form before October. The Royals are starting to get some of their mojo back, having one of the hottest offenses before the All-Star break. Since the return to play, though, the Royals continue to be inconsistent and lack depth. It's gotten bad enough to where they had to bring in 46-year-old Rich Hill to hold down the end of the rotation. They're doing their best to break back into the wild card, but it might not be enough. July has been a roller coaster for the Guardians. They looked dead in the water at the beginning of the month during a 10-game losing streak, but have rebounded since the All-Star break to make it back up to 500. This puts them within 3 games of the wild card, but still not quite in the mix. It's only going to get more difficult though with their closer Emmanuel Clase getting suspended for the next month. The Guardians could honestly end up anywhere in the standings at this point and it wouldn't be a shock. The Twins spent July coasting and playing 500 ball, but it hasn't been enough to break back into the wild card race. They officially waved the white flag during the trade deadline, trading away 10 players from their roster, including Carlos Correa. Team ownership is very transparently trying to shed payroll as they try to sell the team. Hopefully it works because the Pohlads should be nowhere near a major league team. They're about to completely turn away another generation of Twins fans. Not much new is going on with the White Sox, but they finally got rid of Andrew Vaughn. A change of scenery was desperately needed with how much his development stagnated. The White Sox have been surprisingly decent since the All-Star break, and they're more than happy to play spoiler even if they suck. The battle for the AL West has been heating up over July, with 3 of its teams sitting in a playoff spot. The Astros are still on top of the division, but it's been a bumpier July than they expected. Twice this month, they swept someone from the NL West and then immediately returned home to get swept themselves. They still look like the team to beat in the AL West, and a reunion with Carlos Correa might put them over the top. The Mariners have been firmly holding onto a wildcard spot throughout the whole month, but they've still been very inconsistent. Cal Raleigh has been slumping a bit this month, but their rotation has been playing well and keeping most of their games competitive. There's still a lot to like about the Mariners, and they got some new hitters at the deadline to help them get over the hump. If they are true contenders, they'll hold on to this wildcard spot to the bitter end. The Rangers have been one of the hottest teams in July, finally looking like the juggernaut that was promised. With the rotation and bullpen firing on all cylinders, even just the slightest improvement in offense has put them in striking distance of the wild card. Ever since the All Star break, they've been looking like the team of 2 years ago, winning 10 out of their last 12 games of the month. If they can keep this pace up, they could make a run for the division lead. The Angels are just kinda going with the flow. Even though they probably won't finish above 500, they're still technically in the wildcard race. With how great Yusei Kikuchi and Jose Soriano are pitching, don't count the Angels out just yet. The A's continue to be bad as the miserable Sacramento Heat simmers down on them. Guys like Jacob Wilson and Nick Kurtz have been making them watchable and even decent at points, but you can't help but think about how they deserve to be somewhere else. A few of their guys were freed from this hellhole though, with JP Sears and star closer Mason Miller going to the Padres at the deadline. These last few months will be rough for the Athletics, but at least they can play spoiler. The NL East continues to be a two-horse race and likely will be until the very end. The Phillies are continuing to prove that they're one of the best teams in the league. Zach Wheeler is on pace to finally win his first Cy Young award, with an ERA just over 2. Still, their pedestrian offense leaves a lot of questions for October. Bryce Harper is heating up, but their entire outfield has been struggling massively throughout the season. If Castellanos and Kepler can't get it together, it's going to be another early October exit for Philly. Harrison Bader could be the trade deadline acquisition they needed, though, to put them over the hump. The Mets pitching has gotten back to their top tier form in July, but the bats are still lagging behind. They have one of the most egregious home and away splits in the league, looking like a juggernaut in Queens but below average on the road. Still, things have been better since their very weird June, so the Mets don't really have much to worry about. The Marlins are continuing to play solid baseball, climbing back up to a nearly 500 record overall. It would take an incredible stretch for them to even sniff the wildcard race, but they finally have some exciting players that they have no real reason to trade yet. Kyle Stowers is the young power bat they've been waiting for, cleaning up after their great middle infielders Otto Lopez and Xavier Edwards. Just having any reason to watch this team in August and September is an improvement over last season. The season from hell continues in Atlanta, with the Braves losing 6 of 7 to start July. Things just continued to get worse and worse as they just kept getting blown out by pretty much anybody. At this point, there's just way too much adversity facing this team for them to even make it to 500. It sucks for the great individual seasons by Acuna and Olsen, though. Things just keep getting worse for the Nationals as they continue to slide down the standings. This prolonged skid has caused the team to fire their GM Mike Rizzo and manager David Martinez. While it's always good to get fresh faces in the building, firing the architect of their current rebuild isn't exactly a good sign of where the team's at. There's not even that much of a rebuild to speak of besides the returns they got for Soto. Unfortunately for the Nationals, it just seems like it's back to square one. The battle for the NL Central has been heating up. Just ignore the Pirates. The Brewers have finally found their groove, and they've been shooting up the standings throughout July. Apparently, Andrew Vaughn was just the guy they needed, delivering more clutch hits over their 9-game winning streak than he ever had with the White Sox. This is a completely different team than they were back in April, keeping Mr. Hyde away while Dr. Jekyll keeps doing his thing. At this rate, they're going to make it back to the playoffs, whether it's winning the division or being first place wildcard. The Cubs are still rolling along just fine with one of the best offenses in the league. Carson Kelly's success at the beginning of the year wasn't just a flash in the pan, he's still been the team's best hitter. Well, him and Michael Busch, whose breakout season has come out of nowhere. While things are looking good overall for the Cubs, they've had some spotty pitching performances at the end of the month that do raise some questions. You can't give up 9 runs every other game and expect to win the World Series. The Reds continue to be frustratingly average, unable to muster more than a few wins at a time before going on a losing skid. Even though they have a stellar pitching staff across the board, their offense leaves a lot to be desired, basically living and dying with the bat of Ellie De La Cruz. They're still in the thick of the wild card race though, and if there's any guy who can steer the ship in the last 2 months of the season, it's Captain Francona. It's been a complete disaster of a July for the Cardinals, and they've fallen out of the race rapidly. Their pitching is completely cooked with a team ERA over 5 on the month. It's hard to see much of a way out of this freefall too with how demoralized the whole group looks out there. While they have a good enough offense to keep them in the race, the Cardinals do not look like a wildcard team right now. And then there are the Pirates, who are finally bottoming out. They lost 11 out of 12 games surrounding the All-Star break, with each one looking more pathetic than the last. They did win 8 out of 9 to close out the month thanks to their stellar pitching staff, but that offense is still next level terrible. They only hit 11 homers on the month, with most of them coming during that little winning streak at the end. Again, just waiting for Steelers training camp. The NL West is softening up a bit as many of its teams are dealing with the injury bug. The Dodgers struggled to start July, but it hasn't caused them to falter in the standings. Their offense has been ice cold, dropping a lot of frustratingly close games along the way. While it's easy to hand wave away these problems because their record is so great, it doesn't bode well for October. Ohtani and Yamamoto have been fantastic, but it's not enough to hold down a playoff rotation. The Padres are doing their best to catch up to the Dodgers, but it's a lot easier said than done. While their pitching has been excellent, their offense continues to struggle mightily outside of Tatis and Machado. They went all in on this trade deadline, acquiring DH Ryan O'Hearn from the Orioles and star closer Mason Miller from the A's. With the Padres being so stagnant before the deadline, these are the kinds of huge moves that can absolutely move the needle for them in the final 2 months. The Giants started the month decently enough, but they've been running into a load of problems since the All-Star break. Their rotation is incomplete, with a massive dip in quality after their 2 aces Logan Webb and Robbie Ray. And Father Time has finally caught up to Justin Verlander. Their offense has been terrible, and it looks like they're going to be fighting to be 500 by the end of the year instead of fighting for a wildcard spot. The Diamondbacks desperately tried to cling on to hope for a turnaround, but by the All-Star break, it was clear that they just didn't have the pitching to do it. They straight up gave up in the final few weeks of July and were big sellers at the deadline. Josh Naylor and Eugenio Suarez were sent to Seattle, and longtime starter Merrill Kelly was sent to Texas. It's gonna be an ugly finish to the season, and maybe next year too. The Rockies suck, that's really it. They just kinda look normal bad ever since their horrible start to the season, but they still have by far the worst record in the league, and they won't even get their first round pick to show for it. What a colossal waste of time.
This one hit a long way by Sanchez to center. Mullins!
No, he didn't.
No, you cannot be serious. No! No way! No way!
Didn't catch that!
Yes! I want to see the baseball. I still don't believe it.